there's so many people I know here tonight. I told somebody I feel like Guido at the end of 8½. Sort of you have to have seen the movie. Oh my goodness, there's water. I don't know how I rate. Well, some of you have seen some of these things before, but none of you have seen all these things before. And who knows, maybe I'll bore myself and I have my bag is here and I can start grading papers or something. But I'll try to bring it in under an hour, and maybe we have time for talks. And for questions and answers. When I like to open with aspects of some architecture that has influenced me. I'm a painter, but I've always thought about architecture. I think it's when I was a kid, I would come home from the library. I'd be like 12 years old and bringing home books on Louis Barragan, who does not have a building in in the United States. He has a building. He has several buildings in Mexico, and what I always loved about him is the way that he imbues walls and architectural scale building facades with color. And maybe it helps to know that I'm synesthesic. To me, color is I taste it, I can feel its humidity, it's a climate, it's a scent, a flavor. So seeing something like the Casa Antonio Galvez with its reflecting pools and its walls imbued with this wonderful sort of, I don't know what, cerise, has just always been a kind of a goad. And when I think about painting, I think about placing my paintings in rooms. And when I started becoming a painter in college, I arrived at college as a kind of desultory literature major about, writing Mooney poems about not getting what I wanted and stuff like that. And there was this school at UC Santa Barbara called the College of Creative Studies, and I was on an orientation tour, and it was like that movie Road Trip. The kid was giving and I saw these barracks with easels, and Mama didn't raise no fool. I knew that something went on in there. I said, what's going on in there? And he goes, ooh, that's the College of Creative Studies. We don't know what goes on in there, but juniors are supposed to be there, and they don't give grades. And I knew I had to be admitted. Grandiosity and sloth, like in the scales of justice. It was there that I started painting, to get in, basically. And they said, "Have you thought about being a painting major?" And I didn't think that was allowed. I don't know. Many of you in the audience are artists, or almost all of you, and I think you can all remember that conversation you had with the rents. Well, Dad, I think I want to be a painting major. You can picture your parents watching their investment sort of fly out the window, and so there was this enormous silence on the other end of the line, and whole civilizations rose and fell, and they said, well, to his credit, it was like, well, that's great, son, but take an economics class. And so I was allowed to be a double major at the college, and it was a place where you could take any course you want, and not only was it not pass-fail, it was pass-no credit, which means you could get in over your head with classes like unsolved problems in physics, and not do any work, just sort of let it wash over you, and not be punished for it. So it just removed fear from the whole college game. And so I was able to be a double major, a kind of whiff of scholarship still attached itself to the idea of a literature major. And so I was painting, for the first time, because I loved modern art, and but high school painting art programs in San Francisco were being taught by gym teachers. It was basically babysitting. And so, they say, well, Steve, what do you want to do today, since you decided to show up? And they would say, well, and I would say, well, I want to make a Clifford still. And they say, well, that's great. Here's some oat paper and some powdered pigment and a camel hair brush. And, it's heartbreaking. And there was nothing to sort of push again. I didn't know how to stretch a canvas. So I learned all that in my freshman year in the College of Creative Studies. And and on my own, I started thinking about what it meant to be a painter. Like from a very, for some reason, like it wasn't like, oh, I'm painting my feelings. I liked my feelings the way they were. I didn't feel I needed to paint them. Nice fresh coat of paint on my misery. But I wanted to make paintings that were kind of like about painting. And I had the great fortune of studying with, my first teacher was Paul Warner, who was Bay Area Figurative School. So I sort of got inculcated in kind of an expressionist, neo-impressionism, and abstract principles. And I started thinking about, well, paintings go in rooms. And this is before I read John Berger or anything else. I understood that room that I was placing paintings in my mind could be flexible. And it could be a big room, it could be a small room, it could have a skylight, it could have no skylight. It all depended on my intention for the painting, and maybe the painting's intention for the painting. I think that's what intentionality means, when the painting starts making up its own mind. At that point, I was dealing with architecture, and my childhood love of architecture was sort of excited, like a kind of antenna, I would say. Here's another Baragon. It's been up here while I've been talking and giving you that long digression. This is a plaza, and you can see how big these towers are by looking at the size of the cars on the side. So just big slabs of color in concrete. I love this thing. Pratt has all these cats, and there should be a cat here. We could have a lot of fun with that. All right. And then when I got the Guggenheim, part of the Guggenheim, well, there's a story behind getting the Guggenheim, which I'll backtrack in just a minute. But part of the Guggenheim was to go to see a bunch of stained glass windows, and modernist and traditional, like Chartres, but also Notre Dame des Hôtes and with Corbusier, another architect who, I think he sort of made buildings the way, kind of like the way I was at an early on thinking about paintings. He wasn't making buildings, he was making buildings. This is the, Ronchamp is the strangest town, but it's like old people of the corn or something. There was no, there were supposed to be taxis by the, you have to transfer out, it's a long train ride out of Paris, and then you transfer, and you get to this town where people like scowl at you, and there's not a young person in sight. And we walked up the hill, and it was totally worth it. He did his own stained glass windows, and the thing I've always loved about the interior is that they're all set into these expanding bays that are kind of like speakers for light. They sort of funnel, they amplify light as they come in through these little apertures, and then they bay out into the room. And it's all natural light and no heating. There's a close-up. The Villa Savoye. Iconic. Skies look like that in France. You know, you see all those paintings of like puffy little clouds in a Pizarro, then you go to like Paris and it's like, oh my God, there's those puffy little clouds. Who knew? They're not making, and then of course Louis Kahn. And with this building, the Salk Institute, I've had the privilege of standing in this spot, and Kahn's mission has been described as bringing light into buildings and into democratizing light. Like usually, like the workers inside the bowels of a building don't see the light, but he's always trying to open up buildings to light. And light and space in our world sort of intertwine in this interesting way. So the spaces between buildings or the spaces between forms in Louis Kahn become very, very important. So, you know, I don't know if my painting will ever sort of approach this kind of grandeur and this kind of sort of sense of interval, but it's something that I think about. And when I deal with interior space, or exterior space, as it turns out, I'm very aware of the address. So, what happened? Why was I going to? I also visited the Matisse Chapel, but I don't want to be too literal. So the architect Stan Allen approached me, I think sort of at the end of 2006, and he was building a chapel which in many ways was kind of, you know, in part a kind of private dedication to Corbusier, I think, you know, in terms of the open air aspect of it, a children's chapel in the Philippines, and he asked me to think about stained glass designs, and I had this painting that I mirrored on a hinge, and it became like a book, like a grid. That's what the facade is there, and of course the Catholics being Catholic, they really wanted a crucifix, so we grudgingly put a crucifix in the front, but at the back there was a cruciform, which is more pantheistic and more universal. And these things that look like windows in the chapel are not windows. I mean, they're not glassed in. They're open air. And as happens with many stained glass projects for artists, you know, in a post-war period, up until recently, I would suspect, it didn't go through. The money ran out. There wasn't enough money to do the thing. My one point of pride is that the firm was stuck on what to do with the facade, and I suggested a setback. So that setback was partly grew out of a suggestion that I made, and I feel very powerful because of that, or something. I've also spent a lot of time in the Southwest. There's funny stories attached to that, which are endless, and I won't go into them. But besides Navajo rugs, I've always loved Plains Indian corn husk bags. And I've spent time in Rome, and that's coming up, and also in Munich. This is a Roman floor. Actually, no, this is Cologne, I think, which is Colony. This is the Romanish Museum Antiken in the right by the cathedral. So Byzantine geometries sort of mix with Roman in a lot of my thinking, and I was certainly inspired by that when I went to Italy. So what happened is that when I applied to the Guggenheim, Stan had made this suggestion, and I said, well, this has come up, and I have a plan to go to Europe to see these stained glass windows. That fell through, but it had got me thinking about architectural scale. and that becomes important in relation to my painting. So this is a painting that I had made called Miracle Mile. And I was thinking about the pennant flags that you have on car shops and bodegas. And the Miracle Mile in Los Angeles, where I spent some time as a child, it's right there on Wilshire leading to LACMA. And I'm very interested in negative space. This is about a 5-foot square painting, and the intervals became really, really important. So the space from the strip of the top of the pennant flag to the top of the canvas is the same width as it is from the very tippy point of the pennant flags to the next streamer that the pennant flags below are hanging from. And then they're interspersed, and it occurred to me that the white space began to look like teepees. And some of my favorite paintings are Marsden Hartley's so-called American Indian paintings. And I just love that joke, you gotta help me, Doc. What's the matter, son? Well, sometimes I feel like I'm a teepee. Sometimes I feel like I'm a wigwam. Teepee, wigwam, I'm going mad. Relax, I know your problem. What is it? What is it? You're too tense. Which, if you think about it, is a joke about negative space. So this is how my paintings cite themselves in architecture. How's the focus on that? Is it completely out of focus? Good. All right. And my work sort of borrows from architects. It's about being excited by things in space, and they're kind of these sort of funny, sort of punning transcriptions of that onto a geometric dimension and fitted. And the sort of concentric checkerboard of the painting in the back called Look Around, it comes from a Joseph Hoffman rug that I saw at the Kunsthalle in Zurich. So I did something else with it in terms of color. It's a gray rug in real life. And that's kind of how I work. It's like abstraction that finds kind of strange sign-like puns in everyday life, or exalted everyday life. So in thinking about full scale, I had this, Jill Moser's here, and she's someone who was very important in goading me into doing wall work, but this happened before. What happened was I woke up, I had visited Virginia Commonwealth University's great art department, and they had a space that was going during the 90s called Solvent Space, and it was a kind of an old garage or something where the second floor was taken out, and artists like Polly Apfelbaum and now I'm blanking, Katerina Grossa and Corey Archangel, that's who had all done installations there. And I had this dream that I had painted the entire interior of it. And so I woke up at 5 in the morning in a kind of frenzy, and I typed off this letter, and I said, and this is, I'd been thinking about this scale thanks to this commission that didn't happen. And I said, I had this dream. I actually told them it was a dream. And I got this plan because I have to go to Venice and Vance to look at more stained glass. And I was going to go to the Murano glass factory. But if you get I'll come down and give you the plans, and you could get your graduate students to paint it for credit, and they bought it. Which just goes to show something. I don't know what, but don't be afraid to ask. Don't be afraid of the brainstorm. And so I'm in Venice, and I'm getting, and this is at a time where the hotels, the locandas don't have like internet service. You have to go to like an internet cafe, and over the internet cafe, I'm getting these pictures of these wonderful grad students waving. And the reason, and I figured from some of these pictures that one reason why we make something in this scale is partly for the documentation, which becomes at this scale sort of cinematic. So, that's the start, and this is the finish, or closing up on the finish. But of course, it's there's still the tarps and there's other scaffolding. Here's the pennant flag one across the way, which is longer. And there's the finish. And of course, one of the things that happens is like, in some kinds of floor polish, polished concrete floors, this wonderful reflection begins to happen. And then you get to do things like this with something this big. They become really easy to do. And then you get pictures like this, which looks like something out of an Antonioni film to me, like Red Desert or something. And then here was the corner wall. So I got to paint like around in a kind of panoramic. And then a little bit further on, you'll see a panorama that I was able to do later. So for the Rome Prize, I had come back from a show in Switzerland, and I slept through my interview. And they called me up and said, you slept through your interview. And I said, I'll be right there. And they graciously sort of held lunch open for me, and I gave them a catalog that had sort of the way, my kinds of paintings. And I said, I'm very interested in the cosmatesque, which is the terrazzo floors that are Byzantine from the 9th through the 12th century, the Cosmati family, who were part of the Cosmedin sect from Persia, were doing floors with their terrazzo skills in Rome. And they also, famously, the biggest one is in San Marco in Venice. But the ones that are the really beautiful, but grandiose, but still somewhat understandable on a human scale are in Rome. And this is from Santa Maria in Trastevere. Anyway, they bought it too. So I was very, very fortunate to have the Rome Prize. And so I spent a lot of time, people go to Rome and you're just looking up all the time. And I did some of that, but a lot of time I was looking down at these Byzantine geometries. And you can see, I think, with the kind of the velocities of these triangles and intersecting triangles, how much they were, you can see kind of the seedbed for suprematism in many ways. Those red triangles with the green serpentine, the red triangles are really porphyry, which is this purple granite, much of which is on the floor of the Mediterranean from sunken ships, and it's from Egypt, and it's all gone. There's so much marble in Rome that for something like 1,600 years, there were carts going up the Palatine Hill, taking the marble from the Temple of Jupiter and other buildings up on top of the Palatine Hill, and coming down and spreading it out all over. It was called spolia, and 24/7, and they never got all the marble down. So the potential for abstract painting for me was obvious. And then there was, I've had two experiences with inanimate objects where I burst into tears, and one is, I'll revise that. Inanimate objects that sort of reflected my own work. One was the Libera post office. I had another one with twice it happened in Cairo, and once it happened in Testaccio in Rome, and it's the Libera post office. When I saw this building, And obviously the stairwells on either side were what set me off. There was a painted truck. It doesn't often happen, but I had gone into an aphasic state in Cairo from synesthetic overload, and I had to be physically restrained from leaving my tour van on the way to Memphis and Saqqara because I had fallen in love with a painted truck. So they had to put, twice I've had to be put on planes rather than guided to the airport. Once I was back in my drinking career, I was not in very good shape, and they put me on a plane in Anchorage, and that wasn't so fun. But the Cairo, it was more fun. But the only thing that could calm me down was acqua di Nepi, which is a bottled water that you get in Rome that has very, very fine bubbles. And I really believe, like Homer says about the donuts, there's nothing it can't do. So I was like at Fiumicino clutching my little bottle of acqua di Nepi, trying to like come to. And Saqqara was the other place that I burst into tears. And that's like the beginning of columns, and it's the first public space between government and religion, as far as anybody knows. And it's just amazing. Like, oh, here's the first column. Kind of. So, as an abstract painter these days, last several decades, because I'm really old, I sort of respond to goads from the external world in abstractly. Sometimes they function like abstract signs, like the Hoffman rug. Other times they're like Castor and Pollux at the top of the Capitoline stairs. And this is Castor and Pollux. This is from a show that I had in the Academy. And it's a mixture of wall paintings and canvases and watercolors. So it was kind of a mixture of objects and non-objects, and I'm going to show you. But I was thinking a lot about scale. So these are wall paintings, and they just hover. And one of the great joys I've had with the wall paintings is watch people go up to the side of the painting and try to stick their hand into the wall to see if there's, it's like a reverse Jim Terrell, you know? So the painting on the left is a painting on a canvas. And then this is in the other room, and this design came from the original floor of the first Capitoline Museum. Michelangelo, man. So go see that drawing show. I haven't even seen it yet. I've been too busy at Rutgers, but at the end of Michelangelo, at the end of his life, is seen walking around Rome in rags, weeping and howling like a madman, crying out to God, saying, "I've done nothing, I've done nothing." Somehow that anecdote seems to go over really good in the studio school. I've done nothing, I've done nothing. So the little watercolor on the right is actually taped with double-sided tape to the wall. So again, it's sort of, I'm thinking about skins and volumetric sort of suspension with the depth of the stretched canvases. And you can begin to see the reflection in the floor, see the little ghost of the colors. So the floor of the hexagons of the Capitoline Museum are black and white, and I did sort of as a kind of homage to Ellsworth Kelly's Grid, which was a beloved painting, which used to be up at the MoMA in the lobby forever and ever and ever, and now it's not. So that's my homage to Grid. And it also was that the floor at the Academy was hexagons. So I'm thinking about resonances, and then this is the floor this is from a floor in the second Capitoline building, the one if you come up the stairs that's on your right, which was built after Michelangelo died, completed, and has more sort of Renaissance Baroque floors, rather than the early sort of temple-like hexagon floors. The black in this painting is really a deep, deep indigo. So there's a kind of color resonance, and then the indigo itself has violet in it, so it begins to resonate all the colors. And the white is really a color called distant gray. I love the names of these colors. And then I mix my color. It looks like sign color, but in fact it is like sign color. But like sign color, the colors are cross-mixed complements. So the red has a little green in it. The green has a little, even less red in it. And the yellow has a little violet. The violet has a little yellow in it. And that's kind of the way house paint is mixed. So even at a bright level, the colors still kind of meld and seem to share a common light. So this was 2014, I think, at Art OMI. And this is a wall painting that floats, and it's called Oracle. I was thinking of the eyes of T.J. Eckleburg from The Great Gatsby, and the painting on the next to it goes end to end. So one floats and one is end to end, and it's a long painting achieved by extending certain designs of paintings and then dropping out areas. And it's called Canterbury, because I thought of it as a kind of passage. And for me, the white spaces began to take on a kind of figural presence. And that was fun because I started off as a figure painter. And, but I think when I say a figural presence, I'm thinking of the figures in Matisse's dance at the Barnes Museum, which begin to geometricize, as do the late Cezanne's bathers. And then there's a painting. There's a couple of watercolors in this show too. So the idea of sort of like setting off the large-scale wall paintings with paintings on canvas and watercolors again, and then getting ambient shots like this, getting ambient sort of when paintings start to work on this scale, even the architecture that doesn't have anything to do with the painting per se is activated. So, married to Stan is the great artist Polly Applebaum, and we've been friends since 1982. And our work is not alike on one level, but we share, I mean, I feel awkward, she's here, but we cavil about things we like together much of the time. Sometimes, when we will get into a text storm. But I don't know what we did before text. We just used phone? Did we actually just call each other up? Like, Italo Calvino, click. So we were asked by a gallery to do a show together in Bonn, Germany. And the idea, so she brought in her feelies, which are plasticine, and they never dry, but they have some surprises baked into them. Not literally baked, because they weren't baked. And then I thought I would do a wall painting, and then we hung other work in one of the hallways. And then while doing the wall painting, I got this sort of brainstorm that'd be really cool to put a painting on the wall painting. And I think it's just being in proximity to Polly's inventiveness, and I very much like the result. This is another table of Polly's work with a painting of mine. But there's a secret. So when the lights go out and everybody goes home, something happens with Polly's work. And this kind of stuff, again, just makes me crazy with happiness. We sort of imagined that that once we were gone, like the artwork itself, I don't know, there's a Leibniz idea about monads, and monads are simple forms that seem to have intentionality and the kind of the energy that approaches the energy we experience from living things. And abstract art is very interested in monads. It has been since its inception. And so if I extrapolate that into artworks that seem to live at night when nobody's around, we think of them as like having a party. And Christoph, one of the principals in the gallery, would swear that when we got back the next day, there were more of these pieces on the table than there were the night before, that they had like somehow bred. And then a little bit after, then the following year, I was asked to do the lobby at the McNay Museum in San Antonio. And for this one, I sort of toned down the color even further because of the two shadows on the other side of the T spaces. I wanted to bring that shadow into the color. And again, sometimes you just live for shots like that. And then UC Santa Barbara said, we're going to, decided to treat me like a favorite son, and they purchased this. And it's permanent installation, and it's become a big sort of thing. I think Alicia Silverstone had her picture taken in front of it, and with some comment about diversity is what we're all about, meaning like all the colors, completely literalizing the color, but it was a big hit on Instagram. And people like get their photographs taken in front of this like every day. And during commencement, it's a madhouse apparently, and it's still holding up because people lean on it. So they lean back on it with pressing their back foot against the wall. But there's a kind of varnish. This is done with an outdoor paint made by Fine Paints of Europe, based in Canada. I highly recommend it. That's they're not sponsoring this talk, but. And then again, this became their Christmas card. And you can see this from the general parking lot like 200 yards away. So it went up at the same time that they asked me to do an interior, which was up for 6 months, in a panorama. And so the thing about my paintings is that the white itself is a color, my wall paintings, well, even my regular paintings. The color has threads of those red, yellow, and blues that are also cross-mixed already in it. So the white, in this case a distant gray, is again, is a color with the rest of the field. So we painted out the white wall and painted in this new white. And when I got there, I made the spontaneous decision to run the design of the wall painting all the way over the vents at the top. And then, we had to sort of leave all the fixtures unpainted. So it had this, I love the idea of sort of slipping the painting behind and I was the only guy who got to run the scissor lift, which was hilarious because the first thing I did with a scissor lift was crash it into that door. And to this day, I think the molding is loose on the right-hand side. But I measured it out. It's almost exactly 100 feet long. That's a rug by somebody. And they had concerts and poetry readings in here, and it was just a delightful sort of sense of, canvases can be kind of precious. I'm very much a studio rat, and I slave over canvases, and I think there's nothing more pure and essential than a painting on a stretched canvas. But it's wonderful to have this sort of environmental image painting and they take almost as long as the canvases. It's crazy. There's like 6 coats of paint on minimum on any one of these colors. Some of them have as much as 8. The thing about the canvases, which some of you who maybe don't know, some of you do, I don't use tape. everything's painted with sable brushes on this very prepared, smooth surface. But on the wall paintings, you have to use tape. It's insanity not to do it. So these corners have become really interesting to me. And I don't know what I'm going to do with the idea of corners, but I like the idea of bending color in space. And of course, the idea of the panorama was inculcated. I don't know, some of you have been to Rome and to the Palazzo Massimo, and up on the top floor there's this fantastic garden that is a frescoed garden with birds and trees and views over the wall. And so there's precedent, that goes back 2,000 years for, at minimum to what I would, of course, the painting's whole return to the wall is in some way atavistic. Think of all the caveman jokes from the New Yorker that you, and in another direction, I've gone to Oaxaca, and these weavers also work with poly. A mutual friend, Emmy Winter, put me onto them, and this is Geronimo and his family, and they're in Teochtitlan, which is a Zapotec village, and they're all weavers, and I've made these rugs. And I don't know whether these rugs, they have not been shown as a collective at all. So one of them has been shown at Minus Space in a group show about textiles. And who knows, it's quite possible that the next show at Lennon Weinberg will have these in it. I'd like to show them all together as an ensemble. And you can see look around again, only now it's vertical. You can hang these vertical or horizontal as you wish, but I like them vertical, and I've constructed ways to hang them so they just seem to float invisibly on the wall, out in front of the wall by about a ½ inch, so they hover. And they were put in, or they were shown collectively, but not like not in a pure Stephen Westfall show. They were shown at the Suburban, the great space run by Michelle Grabner in Milwaukee, with none other than Polly Applebaum. So these are Polly's glazed ball. And again, this whole thing coming back to like synesthetic experience of color, I've always wanted to eat color, and I've never wanted to eat color more than with these ceramic balls. We had a ball, and I think it was, I can't even imagine what it must have been like for the average Milwaukee person to like sort of walk through the neighborhood and see, this was an old laundromat, and see these ceramic, these beautiful sort of perspectival lines from these balls, and then these rugs. You go to an art gallery, you want to see paintings, damn it. Who knows? So anyway, this was the last show that I had, and what's happening in my work now is the diamond grid is becoming unmoored. So the title of the painting on the left, so they shift in the frame, and they sort of imply contours of topologies that are larger than the picture itself, as opposed to being locked into the picture. So on one hand, they're flat. On the other hand, there's this sense of kind of like almost a planetary sort of wheel of space, at least hopefully. But the painting, I like these titles very much. The painting on the left is called Reclining Harlequin. And the painting on the right in the little atrium space that Leonard Weinberg has is called Three Kings. Red, yellow, and blue. And these are the paintings on the opposite wall. And I'm interested, I think I'm doing all this shouting out, but David Reed is here. And I've never figured out how to make vertical paintings, and now I'm making a bunch of them. Thank God they don't look like David Reed's. Not that they I mean, they should look like David Reed's if they wanted to be synonymous with quality. But I'm glad I'm finding some kind of personal language for this very interesting, very dynamic format. I never thought that a vertical rectangle could be so dynamic. So that's what a room of them looks like. There's a close-up. This is called Delta. And then you can see how the Cosmotesque floors, I'm still working out Renaissance and like the floors from the cathedral in Cologne. Now, I guess there's a storyline to this talk, which is that stained glass thing didn't work out, but it promulgated, it instigated all kinds of thinking about scale in relation to architecture that in an energized way literalized it for me. I mean, I was literally dealing with the full scale of an architecture. If you think of architecture as the mother of the arts, these were mothers. Here's another Renaissance wall painting. Renaissance floor painting, excuse me. I've just finished this article for Art in America, which is in editing right now, on this idea of slow painting, which first appeared, I think, in a John Yao article for Hyperallergic on Susan Freecon. And I sort of realized that it's kind of a thing. So I mentioned all these other artists who I think are slow painters. What I didn't mention is, I remember talking to my partner, I said, I realized I'm a slow painter. This painting took 2 years, this one in the foreground, to paint. You would think it wouldn't take that long, but I just couldn't get the color right. So they just sit there, looking at me, tapping their foot. And again, here's this idea of this figural space. So, I've just been awarded this commission, and it will be completed in the summer of next year for the Astoria Street Station, the 30th Avenue station on the Astoria line, which is the biggest elevated station. And what these are 62-foot long mirrorings of Canterbury, front and back, in laminated glass. And the thought was, it's called Parasma 1 and Parasma 2. And in the argument I made for the proposal, I'm an abstract painter for a reason, and for a reason, there's very good reasons why civic bodies, like an arts commission for a civic entity, wants work that reflects the civic makeup of the area that it's going into and wants that narrative. And my argument was, as an abstract painter, is that mix of ethnicity may change due to all kinds of factors. I mean, we toss around the word gentrification, but the Greek community in Astoria may not always be Greek. It wasn't Greek before it became Greek. And nevertheless, the whole idea of the proportionality and the width of the intervals in this painting, which one is titled Canterbury, the original source for the painting was the big 40-foot wall painting called Canterbury, which sort of references a pilgrimage. And by mirroring the front and the back and creating this much more complex space, I said that the source for all of this in proportionality in visual intervals would be the frieze, which are always processions, whether they're dances or triumphs. So I was also envisioning people getting on and off the subway. So there's a reason, so it's called Parasma 1 and Parasma 2, which is the Greek word for passage. And once again, they bought it. and here's this is the mirror image based on that painting called Scheherazade that was at Art Omai. And once again, I get a kind of double ocular sort of effect. And in thinking about the doubleness and thinking about where it's going, which is going to be under the tracks, and it's a smaller piece, but where the light and dark are much more sort of shimmering in compaction, this piece is called Doppelganger. Ta-da, thank you very much. I'll be here all week. No, I'm not done yet. I'm just thanking you for grunting at that title. So I am almost done. And these are the architectural renderings. So this is what it's going to look like, and it's going to open up, like I say, this summer. One going this way. There's Doppelganger underneath the tracks. And it's going to be illuminated at night. By day, it'll be function as stained glass windows, and by night, you'll be able to see it presumably from blocks away. And there's the other side. So that's what's going on for me. Thank you.